But new movements in Judaism, whether it's Hasidism in the East, the Misnagdism, or whether it's Reformed, Conservative, are really an Ashkenazic phenomenon, a modern one dealing with modernity, either to embrace it, as was the case in Germany, or to hold it at bay in Eastern Europe. But either way, they're all modern. They're not anti-modern. They're all modern because they are self-consciously modern. Even those people who are pretending to be anti-modern, if you say you're anti-modern, it means you're self-aware,
right,
and automatically it's modern by virtue of the fact your project is a self-consciously anti-modern one. That makes you modern.
This reminds me, if I can interject for just a second, the ultra-Orthodox anti-Zionists in Jerusalem, the Torah Karta, once desecrated the grave of Ben Yehuda, and I think it was buried in Mount of Olives, and they spray painted it with graffiti. And so one of the relatives of Ben Yehuda was notified of this, and he asked them, "Tell me, what language was this graffiti scrawled in?" They said, "Hebrew." I was like, "Yeah, they don't even know what they're doing."
Right.
They adopted Ben Yehuda wholesale without even knowing it.
Exactly. So yes, but these are Ashkenazic cultural projects, these creations of new streams of Judaism.
Right. What do you say about those disaffected, or at least they feel that way, Sephardic Jews contemporary? And I come across many of them who say that they feel their culture has kind of been lost and is being compromised and is being swallowed up by this pan-Jewish identity, which kind of at their expense. Do they have a point?
It has a point, but it's not the whole story. And so what I would say about this is, and if you're talking about Israel, for example, so yes, there are complaints that Sephardic culture is denigrated, but those people who were in charge of building the state, who were also the custodians of the new state's culture, the Misrad HaChinuch, the education department.
Sorry, you got frozen there for a second. Are you still there?
Yeah, so did you. Okay.
Sorry. We're back. Go ahead.
So all of those custodians of the new Hebrew culture in Palestine, Israel, say from the turn of the late 19th century, all of those people may have looked askance at Mizrahi culture, but only after they had got done with trashing mercilessly their own Ashkenazic culture.
Mm-hmm.
The Ashkenazic self-critique, they say charity begins at home, but so does self-critique. Zionism itself is, among other things, is a rejection of one's home, of one's parents. When Zionists left, especially in the early days, when they went voluntarily, it wasn't as a result of war and displacement and things like that, and made Aliyah, what were they saying? It wasn't just this positive, we're going to go and build up the land. It was also saying, I don't want anything more to do with this place. I don't want to be in Russia. I don't want to be in the shtetl. I don't want to even be in a big city. I don't want to speak Yiddish. I don't want to eat your food. It's a real youth rebellion. Zionism was a youth rebellion, and a rebellion essentially against the parents.
Yes.
So that rebellion entailed a brutal self-critique. And it was brutal in Germany as well. It didn't manifest itself in Germany saying we want to leave Germany. It was a diasporic self-critique. There were the biggest self-critique in Eastern Europe was also diasporic. Let's say the Bundists. That's a self-critique. The Zionists was another one. There are assimilation is another one. But the whole entire modern Jewish experience is in some ways saying, we don't like the way things were. We don't like the way our parents did things. We're going to do things differently. Even the adoption of Hasidism. there was a time when there wasn't Hasidism before the advent of Hasidism. Those who became Hasidic said, we don't want your kind of Judaism. We want this type. So the complaints about Ashkenazic rejection or denigration of Sephardic culture only come after a really, really brutal self-examination, self-critique, and self-rejection. My book is about this, how it manifested itself in Germany. The adulation of the Sephardim was built upon a whole narrative of self-negation, of Ashkenazic self-abnegation and self-rejection, and a desire to be something different from one's parents.
Right. Absolutely.
So that part gets forgotten in the Mizrahi critique,
right,
of Israel. And also remember that what passes for Ashkenazic culture, let's say Ashkenazic pronunciation of Hebrew in Israel, is not. If you listen to the way Mizrahim pronounce Hebrew and the way Ashkenazim pronounce Hebrew, even in modern Hebrew in Israel, it's different, because the Hebrew that was invented in Israel,
right,
modern Israel, was the way Hebrew was thought that it should sound according to Yiddish-speaking Ashkenazic ears. People like Ben Yehuda, they're native Yiddish speakers. All the inventors of modern Hebrew, native Yiddish speakers. And you can hear, even in modern Hebrew, the deep in the structure of modern Hebrew, traces of the DNA of Yiddish. And anyway, their pronunciation is also a sort of an artificial pronunciation. That doesn't make it makes it normative. It's not I don't say, again, because of our different accents, I don't say which is right and which is wrong. People speak differently, but they may have thought that they were pronouncing things the way Sephardim sounded in 1100 in Spain, but I'm pretty sure it didn't sound like that. It doesn't sound like what you hear on the street and tell today.
Modern Israeli Hebrew is obviously a hybrid. It did away with a lot of the Sephardic, like the het sound, the roll.
Yeah.
For instance,
right.
Yeah. These are all things. Maybe they made them too self-conscious. They didn't want to be too closely resembling their local Arab neighbors. It was kind of like an in-between.
Right. And they also didn't want to adopt. I mean, there was nothing wrong with maintaining Ashkenazic pronunciation of Hebrew. That's what the majority of Hebrew of people who used Hebrew before the advent of the State of Israel, because the majority of people are in Eastern Europe.
Right.
Would have had so why not adopt Ashkenazic? Well, for them, because it sounded too much like Yiddish.
Yeah. They didn't want to sound like Yiddish, but they also didn't want to sound too much like Arab.
Exactly. So, but the point is that the Yiddish one was much more the rejection of the Ashkenazic pronunciation of Hebrew cut to the bone very closely for these people as native Yiddish speakers, in a way that the other one, sort of more Arabic pronunciation is distant from them, because it's not their culture. So anyway, I would just caution people who now that's very different from social policies. Just of modern Israel, job opportunities, socioeconomic status, which we know is lower. Those things exist, and those are policies. Social, cultural, political policies, economic policies of a modern state. I'm not talking about that, but when I'm talking about this so-called denigration of the culture, look, as I say, if they did denigrate it, it was only after they got done trashing their own Ashkenazi culture. And look, one of the things is this, that Israel, I do believe that Israel because they had the resources and had the responsibility to do more to maintain and preserve Jewish languages. It did next to nothing to preserve Ladino, and certainly the biggest of them all, Yiddish. It did the exact opposite.
With Yiddish,
with Yiddish in particular, because it was, Ben Gurion was a sonny Yiddish. I mean, he just was.
Absolutely.
but that's what he spoke. But they had a responsibility to maintain Jewish languages. They didn't, and we lost many different kinds of Jewish languages that have perhaps been in some way preserved, taught, and different kinds of Hebrew as well, because modern nation states homogenize their languages. Not just, it's not a Zionist thing, it's not a Jewish thing. They're, modern standard, Hochdeutsch, for example, or whether it's in France in the 19th century, or whether it was even England, they got, tried to get rid of Gaelic and Welsh and all these languages. It wasn't just an English-speaking place, but there was a concerted project. So Zionism as a nationalist project fits in with a very standard form of procedure of trying to create a singular language for a singular people. But we lost a lot in that.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this, going back to what I said before. Do you think there's any value in doing an exhaustive, objective study of this phenomenon of Ashkenazim claiming Sephardic descent? Or do you think that's futile? And what are you talking about?
No, I don't. No, I don't. I think it would be interesting if the sources are there. So people who are no longer with us, did they write about it? And if they did, it could be combined with contemporary stuff. I mean, it'd be great to ask Nigella Lawson why she said what she said, right. And umpteen other people as well. Why did
Alessandro Ocasio-Cortez recently?
Yes.
City. Yes.
She said it as well. Exactly. In fact, I was interviewed in the forward and made a comment about this. Yeah. Again, another one who latches onto this. I don't know. Yes, no, doesn't matter. But again, it's just another person who was nowhere near Eastern Europe. In the dim recesses of the past. She probably wasn't, but I'm just saying no one, even Ashkenazim, when they talk, long ago we came from Sfarad, no one's from Eastern Europe except the vast majority of Jews,
Right, except for the vast majority of Jews. But Jewish history in Eastern Europe begins very late, though. You also have to take that into account. It's a very late creation. It's a late diaspora, very late diaspora. They all came from somewhere very recently.
Exactly.
What did they
even the Spanish?
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, the Spanish Jews. I mean, about this in the book. The Spanish Jews also said, medieval Spanish Jewry also said, and those who in the 19th century who were opining about the Hebrew of Sephardic Jews said the reason that they speak the way they do, and therefore correctly, is that they came directly from Judea with the destruction of the temple to Spain.
Right.
And so they brought the language of Judea with them.
Although within Spain itself, there were different dialects among the Catalonian.
Of course, I'm sure there were. But
and German and French Jewry also had traditions of coming directly from Judea.
Yeah. I mean, everyone. Exactly.
Everyone.
Exactly.
It's another thing to explore, the allure of Judean ancestry. Perhaps another book.
Precisely. There's a lot of that.
Which brings me to an interesting thing I came across a long time ago about the Efron surname.
Yes.
Rabbi Epstein in Lithuania claimed that a colleague of his whose name was Efron, when he was forced to take on a surname, took the name Efron because their family claimed to be descended from the lost tribe of Ephraim. You ever heard of this before?
Yeah, I have. We know. We actually know, thanks to genealogists, we know the first person to have taken the name was in a small village called Amdur, which is in present-day Belarus, which is where the Efron name comes from. It's an unusual last name because it's Hebrew. Yeah. Most Jews, unless they were Cohens or Levis, didn't really have Hebrew last names. It's an ornamental name. It's a type of little bird, and it's spelt with an I-N. Ein Nun so fit. It's unusual in that respect. It's a big family. I mean, it's a family where most Efrons are, we believe, are related, one way or another. But yeah, it was adopted in the 18th century. I think his name was Eliezer or Eliakim. I think Eliezer took the name Efron, and those records are available.
The fascinating concept, how people, I guess many people in Ashkenaz, maybe more than Sfarad, felt alienated and unmoored, as I like to put it, and looked to latch onto other identities that they may or may not have some connection to. Like, for instance, I also mentioned there was some Ashkenazi Jews who claimed to have Crimean Karaite ancestry, looking for some exotic help them either gain a sense of identity, or they felt it had an inferiority complex. Straight up, they didn't feel they had anything to be proud of from where they were, right?
And that's right. All of these things are designed. I mean, the Sephardic thing to claim oneself, it's all about giving oneself a sense of yichud.
Yichud, right?
That's what it's about.
I love the way you put it. It is a cry for yichud in many ways. But where I may disagree with you, if you forgive me, is where it could have, I think, in some cases, some veracity. Not in all cases would I dismiss it. Right.
No. I don't want to give the impression that I'm dismissing it. It's not for me to say where someone's from. I'm just saying what is a fact is you don't hear anyone boasting about their Ashkenazic ancestry. My family came from, especially those people who are at great remove, or maybe not even Jewish at all.
Right.
Who are Jewish but are at considerable remove from, the daily practices and the community. So that would be someone like Lawson, or someone who's not Jewish, like Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, someone who came back to Judaism, like not came back to it, but someone like Herzl, who was extremely acculturated and at some remove.
Although interestingly enough, that southeastern Europe still had Sephardic Jews until the Holocaust.
Bulgaria, Greece,
and even Transylvania and Romania, by the way. Bucharest, parts of Transylvania had Sephardic Jews. So yeah, you have maybe something. There's a lot to look into, I think, and explore in that region.
Yes, but the only thing is that when you're in New York or something like that, and you're speaking with someone who is identifiably Ashkenazic, and they say that they are that their family was originally from Spain, and I just accept it. That's fine, but what does that mean?
A sense of pride.
Yeah. That's the question is, what does it mean to be what does that mean to be Sephardic? I mean, you're not doing anything that's Sephardic. You don't engage in any sort of demonstrable Sephardic cultural practices. Okay, you don't have to, but you're the one who made the claim that your family is from Sepharad. What are you trying to say by that? That's all. So
that's a larger question. That's, I think, the larger cultural question of what does it mean to be anything? What does it mean to be a Jew? I mean, that's a very huge question.
Well, exactly. I mean, yeah.
I mean, what does it mean to be Sephardi? What does it mean to be Ashkenazi, Romaniot, Talgi? I mean, all these Karaite, for that matter. I mean, all these different sub-ethnic identities. What do they mean? I mean, that's a larger question. I think that deserves a book in and of itself. What do these labels really mean? What does it mean?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to take up too much of your time. If you want to just devote a couple minutes to talk about your upcoming book, I'm very intrigued about that. Meat.
Yes, thank you. So I'm writing a book called All Consuming, Germans, Jews, and the Meaning of Meat. Okay. And it's a cultural and social history of the place of meat in German and German Jewish culture. And the fundamental premise is that meat, as an organizing principle, meat is the most visible and tangible kind of object of difference between Jews and non-Jews. That is to say, articles of faith, whether you believe in Jesus, they're invisible. I'm talking about, and there is nothing. There's not. Now, there's other forms of, wine, for example, is not kosher, but there's nothing as loaded as meat. You have to kill something to get this. It has an entire history itself, and so that difference manifests itself in Germany in some particular ways, right? The difference between kosher and non-kosher is a universal one, but in Germany it takes on certain dimensions from the Middle Ages on, and so I've just written, a chapter on meat markets in the Middle Ages in Germany, which are very, very interesting places where there was, considerable cooperation. And with city rulers and princes and dukes and whatnot, trying to create the conditions where both Jewish and non-Jewish butchers are able to earn a living. So that's a story that I didn't expect, but that chapter follows on a chapter on the Judenzahl. And the Judenzahl, so meat comes in many different forms. It's both symbolic, it's real, it can be artistic, it can be sculptural, as in the case of the Judenzahl. So at the same time that you have these extreme, obscene, extreme images of Jews and pigs, you have in the social realm cooperation in the medieval marketplace. Germany moving ahead, then I'm looking at religion, and so I said it's a divide between Christians and Jews, but once Reform Jews begin to abandon kashrut, it becomes a dividing line among Jews as well. Meat becomes a tangible object of difference. Not being able to eat together is a very big social move. And so I'm interested in, Reform's views of kashrut, the response of modern orthodoxy, which we mentioned before, of their views. But also Germany has one other thing. This is a chapter on religion. I'm looking at 19th century Protestant biblical criticism and their views of temple sacrifice. Because after all, you don't take a zucchini to the temple. It's largely about meat. Not only there are other sacrificial items, but meat is at the center of sacrificial worship in the temple. And those Protestant biblical critics in the 19th century had a lot to say about Jewish forms of animal sacrifice. Germany becomes the first place to publish kosher cookbooks. So there's a domestic story to tell about this as well. I haven't written that chapter yet. And then Germany leads the charge in the 19th century among the animal rights societies to get rid of shchita, which is a campaign that is not successful there, but it's successful in other parts of German-speaking Europe, like Switzerland. Then there'll be a chapter on, concluding with a chapter on the Nazis. And one of the interesting things sort of in the epilogue is that meat still plays an important role. So the attempts are now in Germany by animal rights societies not to get rid of shchita per se, because it's not terribly significant, but halal, which is because of the numbers involved. And so shchita gets absorbed into this debate and dispute. But one of the interesting things is where the Muslim communities and the Jewish communities in Germany don't really have very much to do with each other. They have locked arms and joined in protest. And so once again, we have the story of meat bringing these communities together vis-a-vis the authority of the state that's trying to impose itself. So that's in a nutshell, that's what the book's about.
I'm looking forward. When is that slated to be published?
Oh, slated to be written. I mean, I've written 3.5 chapters, so there's still. I'm halfway done.
Really looking forward to that. It looks really interesting. Do you, by the way, all the current day Temple Mount revivalists and their, for instance, the Korban Pesach, the Passover sacrifices every year? They arrest people for doing that.
Exactly.
That's another thing to look into. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Fascinating subject. I hope to interview you again for your upcoming book, and stay safe. Thank you so much. Dr. John Efron, professor at UC Berkeley, author of German Jewry and the Allure of the Sephardic, as well as many other publications. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. You too. Bye-bye, Joel.